You're watching News Epicenter with me, Maria Shakil. 1 year into the pandemic, are we any wiser as far as the treatment of this virus is concerned? Remember, for the last few months, we kept on hearing about the go-to treatment being that of plasma therapy. Social media was flooded with promotionals motivating people to donate plasma. That was seen as the panacea, that it will solve all the issues. But now the ICMR has said, drop that therapy. That doesn't really solve the case in terms of improved condition of those patients whose condition is deteriorating. Now plasma therapy has been dropped from the government's National Clinical Management Protocol. The AIIMS ICMR COVID Task Force ruled that plasma therapy is ineffective in reducing COVID deaths or even the severity of the disease. Experts also warn that plasma therapy could trigger virulent strains and potentially further fuel the pandemic. However, with plasma therapy now ruled out, there is also no clarity on the efficacy of other treatments like remdesivir, ivermectin and steroids, which continue to see high demand but opposing or even changing treatment guidelines, which is tough for the common man to keep a track of given the state of the medical infrastructure. The search for a perfect COVID cure continues amidst the slow vaccination drive and looming threat clearly of the third wave. So are we in a state where the treatment science is constantly evolving? Joining me on News Epicenter this evening are India's topmost medical experts, Dr. Raman Gangakhetkar, former Chief Epidemiologist of ICMR, Dr. Arvind Kumar, Chairman, Institute of Chest Surgery at Medanta Hospital, Dr. Jaleel Parker is India's topmost pulmonologist. Dr. Gangakhetkar, I'm coming to you first. An ICMR study which was published in October last year reported that this plasma was not associated with reduction in progression to severe COVID-19 cases, but this treatment continued for 6 months. What made ICMR drop this protocol right now?
Yeah, there are certain things which we must remember, that when the Placid trial ended, there was some criticism that we had not tested the titer of these antibodies, neutralizing antibodies, on real-time basis. And a small subgroup analysis that was done was naturally not powered to answer the question related to benefits that could accrue if the titer tends to be higher. So it continued to remain there. We must also remember that most often when you don't have any treatment that is available, no, convalescent plasma is one of those that tends to come up first, which could perhaps be utilized against a disease that people think which doesn't have any kind of a treatment. Now, the evidences kept on accumulating where it tended to show that there is no benefit, or there is neither any kind of benefit that will accrue if you go for convalescent plasma usage. At this juncture, there were certain things which were also becoming more important. One thing which was important is people started using it not only in the mild disease, which was earlier indicated in the national guidelines, but they started using it in moderate to severe disease as well. Now, when you use it in moderate to severe disease, one must also remember that the moderate to severe stage has a dysregulated immune response as a cause as to why they become moderate to severe. So essentially, there also use of convalescent plasma, but at the same time, there was one good study that was published by Dr. Gupta from Cambridge, where he had followed a patient for 100 days and did genomic sequencing. And there it was found that the person had received 3 convalescent plasma units, and each time when that was happening, a newer variant was coming. The second issue that became more important for us is now
Okay.
that newer variants are coming, we also know that these variants are not amenable as much to the immunity that perhaps be there. And at the same time, when you collect convalescent plasma, and plasma. You may be collecting data from a person who was infected by it, let's say 2 months back. Now, it essentially means he
Okay.
may not be having a variant, and I'm treating a case with variant. So it became almost difficult to justify or retain that particular issue in the guideline.
Okay, that's a fairly comprehensive reply to my question there, Dr. Ganga Khetkar. Dr. Arvind, hospitals have revised the guidelines for clinical management of COVID-19 patients multiple times in the last few months. If remdesivir is not panacea, if plasma therapy is not a solution, then how do you treat patients who have severe infection?
Maria, that's a very good question. The remdesivir initially was launched with much fanfare. Then there was this well-known trial by WHO, which actually showed that it was not making any difference, any statistically significant difference in the mortality. All that it was achieving was reducing the ICU stay from 18 days to 11 or 12 days. So the net benefit was in terms of a reduced ICU stay rather than any effect on mortality. Secondly, we must remember that it's an antiviral drug. So antiviral drug will only act when the virus is still in the body and the virus is the problem. If you give it after the virus has disappeared from the body and the rest of the thing, as the previous speaker said, is based on immune response, there giving an antiviral is not going to make a difference, and therefore it has to be judiciously used at a time when you are shifting from a mild disease to moderate to severe disease. So that bridge has to be utilized where the virus is still there in the body and immune system has just started. So that's one. Two, even in that there is no outcome, no improvement on the mortality. So that was about the remdesivir. Now, the single most important thing which has been proved to be useful, which of course was being used last year also, but without a solid proof, but now has a solid proof, is use of steroids, where this famous recovery trial, which was done in England under NHS, clearly showed that in moderate and severe disease patients, if you give steroids, which was dexamethasone 6 milligram per day, given for 10 days, it was leading to almost a 1/3 reduction in mortality. And they also showed that if you give it for the mild disease, it was not only not making any difference in mortality or their incidence of conversion to moderate or severe disease, but was also causing some serious side effects because of the immunosuppression at a time when active virus. So the message was very clear: no use of steroids in the mild disease, but you could use steroids in the moderate and severe disease with expected improvement in the mortality of these cases. So if you ask me, in the last 1 year, out of all the medicines which have come, which is the one which has really made a difference to mortality, I would say there are two things which have been really important as far as mortality is concerned. One is oxygen, which has saved lives, and the other is appropriate use of steroids, which has also saved life. Now there is an overuse or misuse or prolonged use of steroids, which is now leading to a lot of complications, which we are all aware. I will not touch upon that.
Dr. Jaleel Parker, so are we in a space where it is largely trial and error in terms of treatment?
Well, if you see the chronology of events and the way COVID has evolved, let me make a statement which might be very jarring to each and everyone's ear, is that none of us actually really knows anything about COVID. Each one of us have been vocal because of our experiences, because of the literature that we have read of other countries, including our countries, our peers, etc., etc. But the bottom line is that we have not come up with any newer medications to treat COVID, number one. Number two, we have very limited resources as far as the modality of treatment is concerned. I heard one of my colleagues say a few minutes earlier that steroids is one of the backbone of the treatment of COVID.
Yes.
Let me tell you that in the last 6 months, I have been saying again, time and again, that the use of steroids, which has been very rampant, it has not been very diligent and judicious, has caused effects which we are seeing now. So, what you are talking about, the mucormycosis or the black fungus, is a reality now. Having said that, one also has to understand that with the limitations that we have, I think it should be left for the clinician, because over a period of a year, more than a year, we have realized how to pick up and nip the COVID 19 in the bud. So, for that, you have to use various combinations, whichever would see to it that the patient does not go on the ventilator. In last year, we waited for the patient to become ill, and then we tried whether it was remdesivir, tocilizumab, plasma, steroids, blood thinners, etc. But now I think with the way COVID has evolved and with the experience that we have and the lab investigation reports that we have, I think it should be left for the clinician to decide what is best for the patient. Now, some people
Okay.
might say that remdesivir, well, let me complete, ma'am. Some people might say that remdesivir does not change the mortality. Some people would say, oh, tocilizumab is of no use. Let me tell you that forget about this month and a half. For 4 months, I have not used steroid. I have not used blood thinners on patients who had moderate to severe COVID, and they have all returned home on the 5th day and the 6th day with just a combination of remdesivir and tocilizumab. So what are we talking about? And what options are we left with as a clinician if the medicines are not available? So one
Okay.
has to be very prudent, very judicious in what he is going to decide as the modality of treatment. And let's not talk behind tables and behind WhatsApp and behind the boardroom, trying to see what is the correct treatment of COVID-19. There is no literature which says that okay, this is the treatment and this is what should be followed. So
Okay.
my bone of
Okay.
contention is leave it to the clinicians.
Fine. Then, Dr. Arvind, coming to you, is this rethink that is happening, particularly with regards to plasma therapy, because of the fact what it has done in case of young patients? In the second wave, it is the younger patients who were infected more, they landed in hospitals, and in them there were multiple cases of clotting as well. And that is the reason why this rethink.
So, as Dr. Ganga Khetkar had explained right in the beginning of this presentation, that there was a lot of evidence which was generating against the use of plasma, because no tangible benefit in terms of outcome was coming out, and there was this fear about the clotting and various other factors, and that is why this time it has come to a stage where I say actually this should have happened much earlier, but then
Okay.
now it has finally happened. And as far as this time this thing is concerned, it's true that majority of the infections this time have been in the 30 to 45 age group, and unlike last year where most of our deaths were in the 60 plus age group with people who were having multiple comorbidities, what we are seeing this time is majority of the deaths being in 30 to 45 age groups, and surprisingly many of them having no comorbidity at all. So there is a huge difference in the version that we saw last year and the version that we are seeing now, and definitely the final word on plasma is out, that it's not having any effect on the therapy and it should be out. One more thing we have to remember, that the whole experience with this disease is just about a year and a quarter, and therefore it's been a kind of a learning process, that you try one thing, it doesn't work, you try. As was mentioned, there is no magic bullet that we have been able to discover in this 1.25 year of existence of this disease, and therefore the treatment continues to evolve, and I'm sure if we were to talk about 6 months later, we might be talking of a completely different regimen from what we are practicing today.
To Dr. Ganga Khetkar. Dr. Ganga Khetkar, look at what Lancet has said in its report. there was no significant difference in 28-day mortality between the two groups. 1,399 of 5,795 patients in the convalescent plasma group and 1,408 of 5,763 patients in the usual care group died within 28 days. So the experience world over has been similar to what India has experienced, and that is the reason why this therapy has been dropped. The decision has been taken only yesterday. But Dr. Ganga Khetkar, could it have been taken earlier?
Yeah, it could have had been taken earlier. There is one thing which we have to understand. No, this disease is a rapidly spreading infection. No, we have not witnessed such a kind of a rapid spread for almost decades. No? Now, when such a disease comes up that spreads rapidly and also has mortality, that is one of the adverse outcomes that you are worried about. You must also remember that there is some amount of panic that tends to set in, even among those who are medical practitioners, even among the scientists. So one decision that everybody tends to take is, if you want to discover a drug, you need to understand the disease better. Unfortunately, here we took almost 2 months time to understand that this virus would hardly be seen in the blood. No, because every time when it is going for a multi-organ involvement, the basic thing that we perhaps would have thought is the organism goes through the blood, but that was not seen. And then when we understood this particular organism, people started working over it. The most natural solution for a quick fix or a quick solution is always repurposed drugs. So essentially, if you see so far in last 1.5 years, most of the drugs that have been used are repurposed molecules. No, they were emergent. There were only emergency use authorizations that were given to it, which essentially means your evidences were not so strong. Ideally, what do you require in public health measures? What you require is you recommend therapy only if there are adequate evidences based on which people will start using it. But if the risk benefit had to be weighed to begin with, when we didn't know anything, people used repurposed drugs. But now is at least the time to change the same. If there is no benefit that is accruing by continuing to use those drugs, even if they are in emergency use authorization, we must stop them. So I don't see that something which we could have had done earlier. Yes, we could have had done earlier. It's a hindsight. Anybody could say that. But what is most important is we are doing it. We are dropping drugs. As I keep on telling in the talks that I give in academics, I always say this is a saga of dropping drugs, repurposed molecules, rather than anything else so far. And let's hope that perhaps a new drug will come. With many drugs are in trial mode, one of those drugs could perhaps work against this virus well.
Dr. Parker, yes, there is no answer to this, this disease or virus. It's an evolving science. We are seeing it clearly. It's trial and error that's happening. So what do you think will be the big challenge as far as the treatment protocol is concerned in the coming few weeks? Because it is being anticipated and predicted by all of you that in the third wave, it will be the little children who will be impacted.
Well, the biggest challenge will be the availability of the medications that are recommended internationally. Now, whether it be tocilizumab, whether it be favipiravir, whether it is remdesivir, I think this drug should be available at your beck and call, at least to the institutes where it will be used diligently after a careful clinical evaluation as well as supportive evidence by doing all the lab tests, including a CT scan. Other than that, I think vaccination is the future to fight this COVID-19. Vaccination should be available to each and every Indian citizen. Please, for God's sake, I'm repeating this again and again. Make it available as early as possible. And those who can afford it, please support the poor who cannot afford it. even whether at whatever price it is by the government, if we can help our other citizens by paying for their vaccines, I think that would be the most wonderful thing to do to an Indian citizen who is our brethren. So let the medicines be available, let the beds be available, let oxygen be available, and let the vaccination be available. If
Yes.
these things
So
are
while
available,
mitigation continues, clinical management continues, vaccination is the only shield that we have. Dr. Arvind.
True, Maria, that as of today, as we have discussed, when it comes to medicines, there is so little available, and we are seeing in our ICUs every day that despite using whatever we have at our disposal, we are still losing patients. And sadly, in this wave, we are losing in patients in 30s and 40s, and many of them without comorbidities. So that's a very, very sad thing. So, under the circumstances, preventing the chain of transmission, or rather breaking the chain of transmission by vaccinating, by making the people
Dr.
develop
Arvind, I'm going
immunity.
to just ask you one question, because this morning we lost someone we knew and he was just 31-year-old without any comorbidities.
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand, a young person without comorbidities losing this battle, what could be going wrong? Plasma therapy was also perhaps given.
There is a difference in the strain that we had last year and the strain that we have now. Last year it was the elder population which was more affected, and the mortality also was primarily in that group. Not to say that we didn't lose young people, but the percentage was much smaller. Whereas this time, in terms of the age group which is affected, and also in terms of the age group which is having a mortality hit, it is the 30 to 45 or 30 to 49 age group which is taking the major hit. Now, why this virus has affected? Now, one reason could be that this time our 45 plus population, not the big chunk, but at least some part of this population is vaccinated. That could be one. Maybe as a carryover or hangover of the last year, our elderly population was more.
Okay, Dr. Gangakhetkar, I'm going to give you the final words. Just help us understand that if the third wave is about children, what will be the big challenge?
No, I hope we will learn lot of lessons of first wave as well as second wave, and I still believe that the way the pattern should be, you will perhaps have a longer interval between second and third wave compared to what you would have between first and second wave, unless a new variant, which perhaps is not amenable to the natural immunity as well as vaccine induced immunity. So essentially we will have a longer period, and during that particular period, if we are able to prevent it by all the measures, it's rapid vaccination that we require. Perhaps you will also need 95% of the people adhering to the COVID appropriate behavior. Perhaps third wave can not only be prevented or delayed, you will also make that wave smaller, because if you vaccinate 18 plus population very quickly, the likelihood that the younger ones will also get infection will also be minimized to a large extent. So the answer lies in rapid vaccination, adherence to COVID appropriate behavior. That's something which will make a huge difference. And let's learn that, try to augment our capacity not only in adults but also in the pediatric population to be cared of by the healthcare infrastructure. Perhaps it's a call which is a comprehensive call which we will have to address before the second wave starts reaching the bottom, and ensure that we will complete the entire tasks within next 3 to 4 months time.
All right, Dr. Gangakhetkar, I appreciate your time on the show. Dr. Arvind, thank you so much for your time. And Dr. Jaleel Parikh, appreciate your time. Of course, this is an evolving science, as we have been discussing. There is no panacea as far as the treatment is concerned. Medical community is trying to manage the disease and this virus. We hope that they will succeed. That's me. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you tomorrow.